For those tuning in to the original broadcasts of the 1977 TV holiday special Bing Crosby's Merry Old Christmas, which aired in late November in America and on Christmas Eve in the UK, it was a bittersweet experience. The titular legendary singer had died of a massive heart attack just a few weeks earlier, after a day of playing golf in October 1977. The special, in which Bing and his family are invited by a long-lost relative to spend Christmas in England, ultimately meeting the ghost of Charles Dickens in the process, was given an extra tinge of poignancy now that it was also a posthumous celebration of Crosby's legacy. Still, one has to imagine that the mornings after it aired, there was just as much conversation about one of the special's oddest moments, a surprising, unexpected, and seemingly out-of-nowhere duet between Crosby, the beloved crooner, and glam rock icon David Bowie, who together performed a medley of Little Drummer Boy and the newly written Peace on Earth. It was an unusual pairing, to be sure, but not one without strategic value for both men. Crosby was hoping to draw a younger audience in addition to his older fan base, while Bowie was looking to somewhat normalize his reputation after recovering from a debilitating drug addiction and facing accusations of Nazi sympathizing for comments he made while portraying his Thin White Duke character the year before. As odd as the duo may have been, it nevertheless was arguably the highlight of the special, and, thanks largely in part to MTV putting the segment in holiday rotation as a music video throughout the early 80s, the duet became an undeniable holiday classic, the last great partnership of Crosby's long and illustrious career. But it certainly wasn't meant to be that. In fact, when Crosby died, it unfortunately meant the cancellation of an in-the-works new movie that would have seen Crosby's most iconic partnership finally reunited after more than a decade. An eighth film in the Road To series of films co-starring Crosby and comedy legend Bob Hope. Kicking off with Road to Singapore in 1940, and continuing on through 6 sequels, the Road To series was one of Hollywood's most successful musical comedy franchises for over 20 years. The individual films were satires of some of the most popular film genres of the day, such as jungle movies, high seas adventures, and Arabian Nights films. Hope and Crosby would typically play a pair of con men with get-rich-quick schemes who end up on globe-trotting adventures. The first 6 films in the series were wildly successful, but the 7th and final entry, 1962's Road to Hong Kong, which came after a 10-year break in the series, was less well-received. By that point, critics thought the two men were now too old to believably play the sort of rakish young rogues they had in the previous installments. And much of the audience was upset about the series demoting co-star Dorothy Lamour, who had played the romantic female lead in all 6 previous installments, but was given just an extended cameo in Road to Hong Kong, with the lead female role instead given to beloved sex symbol Joan Collins. But not even Collins' bigger star power could save this final entry from an apathetic response from audiences, who felt a brief appearance in the film from an up-and-coming young comedian named Peter Sellers had more juice than the tired antics of Hope and Crosby. And so the series came to an end, and the two men went their separate ways. One can't help but wonder, if not for Crosby's death, if the planned 1977 reunion movie, Road to the Fountain of Youth, would have had a genuine shot at kickstarting a new, rejuvenated run for the series, perhaps finding a younger audience drawn to the duo after Crosby's televised team-up with David Bowie. We'll never know, but the spirit and legacy of the Crosby and Hope team-up lives on, as the Road 2 movies are widely credited as largely inspiring the sort of bromance two-hander that would continue to be a comedy genre staple from then on. Ultimately, even the world of animated films would trade in on the franchise's influence, including an early 2000s film with music by Elton John, who, interestingly enough, was arguably as inspired during his career by Crosby's collaborator David Bowie as the rest of the movie was by the Hope and Crosby films. You could almost call it a circle of life. The year is 2000, and Dreamworks Animation is ready to try to out-Disney Disney with a brand new film, and in the process, hopefully launch the next big animated family adventure franchise with The Road to El Dorado. 10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. And first and foremost, we're bros before El Dorados.
Okay. Nice. I was really worried that you were going to try and go with some route of like, we're two like Spanish like thieves or something. It's like, oh God, please don't.
No,
Please
no,
don't
no,
put
no,
us
no,
in.
no, no.
Yeah.
No.
No, well, here we are. You know what? It's the Wild Wild West reunion everyone's been waiting for. So in our latest edition of 2D Evastation. Right? Did I get that right?
Two devastation, yes.
2 Devastation, yeah. Our month-long tribute to 2D animated films. We looked at Doug's first movie last time, and we're just rolling right along with, as I said, a big Hollywood reunion, a movie like, I don't know, a little bit of a cult classic nowadays, maybe.
Yep.
We'll talk about all this, but we're talking about 2000's The Road to El Dorado. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
For sure. It is directed by Eric Bergeron. This is his first feature. He was a storyboard artist in children's animation, which is funny because we just did Doug. Oh, well, we didn't do Doug, but we talked about Doug's first movie. But
and I also want to just quickly, not to cut you off, but I want
Yeah.
to say I feel it's important that on Letterboxd he's credited as Bebo Bergeron for some reason.
yeah,
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there.
yeah. He worked on shows like Arthur and Caillou, by the way.
Okay.
The second director is Don Paul. This was his first and last feature. He's a special effects animator. He did movies like The Land Before Time, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Pocahontas, and Prince of Egypt, which we're going to talk about as well. Also, Jeffrey Katzenberg is uncredited, but he seems to be maybe a ghost director as well. He produced the film, head of Dreamworks Animation. He famously resigned from Disney to start Dreamworks Animation with Steven Spielberg. So he is uncredited here, but by most accounts, he was extremely involved in making the movie.
Yeah, and we should also, are you going to mention the other two guys here as well?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. That's a tease. We call that a tease in the business.
Yeah. The movie is written by writing partners and F2F alums, Trev. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio. They wrote Godzilla, is a movie we covered in Monster...
98 Godzilla. Yes.
Yeah, 98 Godzilla. Monster March Madness was our theme months there. So you go back and listen to that. We actually had some guests on that one, which is awesome.
Yeah.
From another podcast.
And don't worry, we didn't spend too much time talking about P. Diddy. The awkward silence. Looks like someone's been reading the news lately.
Yes. A lot of Come With Me.
Yeah.
They also wrote Aladdin, Shrek, Pirates of the Caribbean. So,
I always primarily think of them as the Pirates of the Caribbean guys, which I know is weird because obviously Aladdin is bigger than that, but I don't know. Like, there's something about like their names to me always signify Pirates of the Caribbean. Is that true for you as well, or?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Definitely. Even though Aladdin is my favorite animated Disney film of all time.
Yeah, you know what? It's a pretty good one. I can't deny that. Pretty good.
I know that's a hill that most people won't die on, but Aladdin is fantastic.
You know what I think it might be? Do you agree that and especially when I was younger, when those animated films come out, I guess I just don't think about the writers of animated films as much, which is weird.
No.
I know that's like kind of unfair, but obviously animated films do have writers. But I think there's something in my head where I often think of animated films as being kind of more written by committee a little bit. And then I think of like as if Pirates of the Caribbean wasn't, but still, there's just something where I'm more like, oh yeah, those guys wrote that movie, but Aladdin and Shrek, like I just think of it like, oh, they're probably part of a bigger team or whatever.
This might be a tangent, but also just makes sense for us talking about 2D animation, is that I think because there's usually like multiple directors, there's multiple artists, there's multiple like departments that are like really in the thick of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in the above the line. The categories, as the Academy likes to say. So, yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, all filmmaking is collaborative, but animation seems like especially collaborative to me.
Yeah, definitely. The Road to El Dorado, budget, $95 million. Domestically, it made $50.8 million, and then worldwide, only $76.4 million. So this was actually the third animated feature in DreamWorks Animation history, promised as the next big blockbuster franchise, and it was the first movie of their tenure to actually not earn a profit. So, not a good look, and it was actually critically panned as well. So,
Yeah, and I don't know. I can't remember if we talked about this last time in the last episode of Doug's first movie, but there's something we don't cover a lot of animated movies in this podcast, at least not until recently. But there's always something I don't want to say especially embarrassing, but almost more like especially surprising when an animated film bombs to this level to me, right? Because it's almost like I always had that mindset of like, well, these animated films that are for a younger audience, I'm sure all the kids that will drag their parents out to see that, So it's always there's always like something kind of special, in a negative way when one of these fails like this spectacularly.
Totally. So I think a good place to start is with Jeffrey Katzenberg, the former president of Disney Animation, under CEO Michael Eisner. DreamWorks is a fairly new company in the grand scheme of things. But he was really involved with Disney. He was the president, as I just said. And he and Michael Eisner really didn't get along.
No.
And yeah, sorry.
No, I'm just gonna say I remember all this. Like I remember like the.
Well, that's what I mean.
hubbub.
It's so new. Like DreamWorks came out in like really late 90s, I guess, right? Right before this movie.
Mid 90s, right? Like which is like it's
1994. That's what it was. It was founded
in
in
the entertainment
94.
sphere. We would still consider that fairly recent, right? 'Cause
Totally.
all these other studios have been around forever. But I remember, I've talked in this podcast before about how the mid 90s is when I was getting really into like entertainment reporting and reading magazines like Premiere and Movie Line, Entertainment Weekly constantly. And I remember being very tuned in to like all the hubbub about how Katzenberg is like leaving Disney because he always thought he was meant to be like Eisner's successor, and Eisner started making it clear that's not the case. And so there was like all these reports in the trades about like the rivalry between the two of them. And then that moment where him and Spielberg and Geffen like decided to form this new company that at the time it was supposed to be like this entertainment onslaught, right? Because Geffen was like, I have the music element. Katzenberg's like, I have the animation element. And Spielberg's like, I have just the general live action element. And it was like, oh my God, DreamWorks is just going to be unstoppable. And I remember that. I remember being, like a teenager being really into entertainment and like how exciting the forming of DreamWorks felt.
100%. And it was kind of a funny time because their first feature that DreamWorks debuted with was Ants, with Woody Allen. I know we're not supposed to talk about Woody Allen anymore, but
Are you ready for a patented Trev hot take? I like Ants more than A Bug's Life.
well, same here.
Okay.
I fucking love Ants.
I think Ants is very funny. I think it's like forgotten today, but it's probably the Woody Allen of it all. I'm sure it's a big part of it, but yeah.
Ants was something else. DreamWorks, went for a more mature feeling, a scarier vibe, a more a lot darker than Disney. And I felt Ants like, if you remember it, I know you do, but I always think about like the termites being these absolutely like horrific monsters that the ants had to go fight with, and like Sylvester Stallone's head gets chopped off and he's still alive, and it was like a brutal little movie.
Hey listeners, it's Chris just jumping in here while I'm editing the podcast, and I'm here to say a correction. We are both talking about how much we love ants, and I just said that Sylvester Stallone's character's head gets chopped off and he's still alive. Incorrect. That was Danny Glover. Danny Glover's character's head gets chopped off and he's still alive on the battlefield. Anyway, I just thought I'd jump in here and make a correction, correct myself, correct my co-host that obviously is no help to me in correcting me live. Anyway. Back to the show.
Yeah, even in the casting, like you said, I know we're not supposed to talk about Woody Allen, but even just the idea of casting Woody Allen as the lead in your first big animated film, there's like something, you're making a statement about what kind of movie that is and what kind of audience you're playing to. Obviously, yes, a younger audience, but also saying like,
a younger audience for Woody Allen.
Oh God. But definitely saying there's going to be like a little bit more of an, there's some humor in here for the adults as well, right? So you're trying to play to both ends, yeah.
Totally. But like, Ants is awesome. And it was funny because Ants was pushed out really quickly because A Bug's Life was coming out. And it was like this whole weird studio battle between Katzenberg and Eisner.
That really was, the conversation really was, is DreamWorks going to be the company that can actually like unseat, Disney in terms of animation domination? That was like a real like question at the time.
Oh yeah. And he really wanted to focus on, again, a more mature outlook on films, and then add in historical events as well. So there's a little movie that came out after Ants, which was called The Prince of Egypt. So that's another movie I find it actually fantastic. Like I love The Prince of Egypt. And the history of that movie is interesting because Michael Eisner actually refused to make that movie. The reasoning why, and Trev, you're going to be shocked, but Disney wanted to remain religiously neutral.
What? Thank God that's changed. Thank God today they're so ready to, really put their money where their mouth is in terms of all their, LGBT representation and speaking to a wide, diverse audience,
Yeah. So basically, this was the next big feature that Katzenberg and co. wanted to bring out with DreamWorks. It was a huge hit. Both movies were big hits, by the way, Ants and this one. But then Road to El Dorado is the next one up, and they go to the screenwriters, Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, as we said. Mm-hmm. And Katzenberg gives them a 1,000-page textbook. What is it titled? Conquest, Montezuma, Cortez, and the Fall of Old Mexico.
Yeah, a book by Hugh Thomas. Yep.
Yes. So basically, he gives them this book, and then also he says, have you seen the Road to films starring Bob Hope and Bing Crosby? Mm-hmm. Now, Trev, I pose that question to you as well. Have you seen those?
Surprisingly enough, and I know you're going to make a joke about how I could have went and saw him opening night at the theater, given my age, but I do watch a lot of old movies. I consider myself a little bit of a classic Hollywood aficionado, and yet I've never seen a single one of the Road 2 movies.
Yep.
When I was growing up in the 80s, Bob Hope still was like a big fixture on TV. I remember him having like annual like TV specials and everything. And I understand Bob Hope's importance in the overall like history of comedy. I've never particularly found him that funny. He's never been like my guy, so I never made a point to really go back and like visit his old movies or anything. Something tells me I probably would find them charming, but I've never had the impetus to sit down and watch any of them, but I've always been aware of them. Just you always hear about Hope and Crosby as one of the early like comedy duos, but I have checked out things like, Martin and Lewis and Burns and Allen, but not Hope and Crosby.
Right. Well, to give, I guess, maybe some younger audiences a benchmark or something of what these movies were. There were 7 films produced from 1940 to 1962. They were like buddy comedies with these two guys. They revolved around side gags, fast-paced verbal comedy, and musical numbers. And there's been so many homages to them in Hollywood, in TV and film. But one I wanted to kind of cite, just to kind of give a real easy glimpse, and you're going to hate this, but think of the Brian and Stewie episodes of Family Guy.
I thought you were going to say like the more obvious. Like that's the thing too, is I never bothered with these, but when I was growing up, there were still obviously movies that were so heavily indebted to them, like Ishtar with Dustin Hoffman and Warren Beatty, right? Or Spies Like Us with Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd. You can like whenever like even something like probably like Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. I think like all of these movies owe a debt to the Road to films. Yeah. Totally.
And I picked Family Guy.
Yeah, well, different tastes for different folks.
Hey, those episodes are fun. When a Brian and Stewie episode came on, and they would just go on their hijinks and have little musical numbers, and I like those episodes. Mm-hmm. It's been a while since I've watched Family Guy, if I'm being honest, but
I think you're probably good. I think you're probably, I'm going to go on a limb and say it's probably very similar to what it used to be.
You think so?
Yeah, I don't know if there's been much evolution.
Yeah, maybe not.
Is the dog still dead? Is that the thing, right?
No, the dog came back almost immediately, I think.
Oh, really? Okay, I thought they left him dead for a while, but
I think they left him. They left him dead for a few episodes, I think. And actually, that's when I started to watch again. They did get me with that. They got me with that when they're going to kill Brian. But no, he's back. He's back.
Oh, okay. Well,
call me when they kill the baby.
Man, no stakes in the Family Guy universe.
Yeah, totally.
Maude Flanders didn't come back.
Thank God. So yeah, Katzenberg gives them that book. That's the movie that I'm envisioning. Something, a little bit more mature, a little bit funny, an adventure film, and more revolving around anti-heroes, right? Mm-hmm. So Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott talked about the two main characters that they write into the film, Miguel and Tulio, as more of if you gave a movie to sidekicks. Yeah. Right? And the reason they did
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead kind of approach. Right?
Totally. Yeah. And the reason why is because, this is a quote from Ted Elliott, they get to be greedy, flawed, stupid, versus virtuous traits of heroes and more like anti-heroes. So it gave them a little bit more playfulness in the film, right?
Yeah, the way when I hear them talk about it kind of like that. What I picture in my head of what they're aiming for was almost like the gang from It's Always Sunny as like the main characters in an animated adventure film, right?
That's a great through line. I like that.
Yeah.
Not
I'm
exactly
available too. I'm available for pitches, Hollywood. I can
right.
I can write this for you.
Now I got to edit that out. So now that they have the writers, they have a spec script, they're off to the races. They need some directors. So they go to animator Will Finn and Simpsons director David Silverman, speaking of just like Fox animated shows. And they were the original film's directors. This movie, Trev, goes through the most rewrites possible.
Yeah.
Constantly tinkered with, constantly back and forth. Katzenberg pushed it to be bolder and darker and sexy, and then pulled back and said, let's make it lighter and funnier and less sexy.
It's so weird,
it's
right?
Fucking bizarre, man.
I read and like watch these things about like the making of this film, and I can only like sympathize with the creatives working under Katzenberg for this movie, because it really sounds like he was giving them mixed messages from the beginning. You know, because like it's one thing, it's weird enough to come with like a book all about Cortez and like the destruction of the Aztec Empire, and then say at the same time like, here's this book, but also watch the Road 2 movies. And mash these up, right? And so you're already like, what? And then he's like, well, but I want it to be kind of big and epic and serious, just like, you know, Prince of Egypt. And they're like, okay, so that's like what Will Finn and Silverman like approach it as, is like a serious kind of epic movie. And then suddenly Katzenberg like remembers the Bob Hope and Bing Crosby thing. It was like, oh no, I should be funny, you know? So it just sounds like it must have been like a frustrating movie to work on. And as you said, like it even became known in like Hollywood circles as a movie that was just getting like rewritten and put on hold and just became like kind of a mess for a bit.
Oh yeah, so much so that the directors obviously leave. Then Katzenberg brings in the team from The Lion King, the musical team. We got Elton John, we got Tim Rice, we have Hans Zimmer, and we have John Powell.
This is what we call just plopping your big old Hollywood dick out, right?
Yes.
Like, and saying, hey, take that, Disney. I'm stealing, you know, the Lion King musical team.
Yeah. But the weird thing about that, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the review, is that you know, Terry Rossio has a quote here: "The story changed, but the songs didn't." And the goal was to have the songs tell the story. So that was one of our biggest failures. Yeah. Because when you watch the movie, and like I said, we'll get into it, it's just not working.
Yeah.
It's not working, and again, it's because Katzenberg takes over and he's giving everybody mixed messages. That this becomes just they get pulled and pushed, and this movie becomes silly putty. You know.
I think we can say this now without it being like a spoiler for like our thoughts or our review or whatever. But because I'm interested to hear what you think about this later, because you've made your thoughts on like musicals clear before.
Yeah.
That because of that change, this ends up being very different than most animated musicals in that the characters are not singing the songs. The movie will just suddenly go to like, you're watching like a montage set to these songs, and it's just like, oh, I'm just hearing Elton John like sing this song, and it's not the characters themselves. You know, a few times throughout the movie, and that's pretty different. And that's because, as you said, suddenly they're like, I don't know, it wouldn't really make sense for like it to be the characters, so we're just putting the songs in, and yeah, it just has this like, you can kind of tell there's like a disconnect between the songs and the story for sure.
And then the movie just becomes extremely rushed. Right? Because there's another movie from Disney coming out. See, this is the thing about this movie is so weird because it's right in the thick of DreamWorks v Disney.
Yeah.
This is the movie. This is where everything collides and ultimately results in this movie's complete failure. And there's a movie coming out called The Emperor's New Groove, another Aztec set film. So because of that, this movie gets extremely rushed in its animation, plus that they were finishing off Prince of Egypt at the time, so there was really only 100 animators that were assigned to this project, while everybody else's resources were for Prince of Egypt, and then they had to pull them back to work on this one. This one really did seem like a nightmare. Like, I hope we're doing it justice by jumping around ourselves, but it really did feel like this one, the cogs were all over the place without a captain, and it just feels like a total, I don't know, mismatch.
Well, and again, I don't think we're giving anything away to say this, but my memory of the time, and obviously you were younger, but I wonder if this lines up for you at all, is like, I feel like the thinking on the street was like, even despite all this, right? Because like a lot, usually like, especially in a pre-internet era, which this was, if you were really tuned to Hollywood news, you might have heard what a mess this was, but the general audience didn't know that, right?
No.
And I think the actual thinking was like, oh, because the previous DreamWorks successes, and because DreamWorks just hit the ground running is such a big statement. I think the thinking on the street was Road to El Dorado is going to be like the big hit, and Emperor's New Groove, that doesn't look that good.
Totally.
Right? I think that was kind of thinking of like, this might be like a Disney miss. There's nothing like special about that one. And then as we know, like Emperor's New Groove goes on to have quite the pop cultural imprint.
Oh, yeah.
That's a movie that people like just love today. It gets a sequel, and I just feel like it's held on. Yeah, I would call that one kind of like a little bit of a cult film too, in a sense, and that wasn't it's not on the same level of Aladdin or The Lion King. But I felt like it was that's what it surprisingly good. That's what I always was the thinking of that one. Whereas this obviously landed with a thud, as we said.
And also just the casting too. Like DreamWorks really started the get a celebrity to voice our movie, get pop culture references in, get big music, get big songs. And getting Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh in the roles here versus, I mean, no disrespect to David Spade, but David Spade at the time, being the lead of Emperor's New Groove, is he really the guy to? Is he the guy to guide you to greatness? You know what I mean?
There's a definite. I know what you're saying. There's a definite esteem gap between Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh and David Spade and Patrick Warburton.
Totally.
Now you ask me which two. Who do I think is you say that, and I say which two are more suited for an animated voice work? Well, it is Spade and Warburton, but like I said, this starts the trend of saying yes, but let's get actors to to do the voice work. And everyone's favorite Spanish actors, Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh as Miguel and Tulio. another trend in Hollywood animated features.
They actually recorded together. For this film, I had mentioned something like that with Doug's first movie when they changed production from New York to LA. In that film and TV show, everybody was spread thin across the country recording their lines. This is one of those instances where you have your two main characters that get to play off each other in real time. So a lot of this film was even improvised between the two of them and could build on that chemistry in the room. So, again, we're going to talk about the film. But I do like when you get that naturalistic interplay between actors. So something different on this one. Oh yeah, rated PG-13 at the time. Had to cut a lot of shit out to make it PG.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's a great quote from producer Bonnie Radford who says, we originally thought it was to be rated PG-13, and so we skewed it to that group. But then we thought we could not exclude the younger kids, so we had to tone the romance down. But beyond even the romance, you can just, again, when you watch the movie, you can sense how at one point this was definitely aiming for something more adult. They were going for steamier love scenes, and they were going to have kind of more scantily clad women, and it was just there was more definitely. I mean, this is a movie about Cortez, the conquistador who came and destroyed the Aztec Empire, and so it was it was coming off of Prince of Egypt, which is a pretty mature movie, and that's what they were initially aiming for. And then I don't know if it is the Emperor. I always wonder, is that the Emperor's New Groove fear that got into them? We're ooh, that looks so goofy. We have to try and make this goofier to compete with it. I don't know, but it's again an awkward mishmash.
Oh yeah. The word around the street was this was called El Dorado, the Lost City on Hold. That was fun. I like that. Yeah. I mean, lots going on with this one. Yeah. Again, hopefully we're doing it justice, but it sounds like a train wreck of a production, and DreamWorks. Quickly forgot about this movie, especially because the next one out the gate was Shrek. So once Shrek took over, DreamWorks changed completely. The Shrek Avenue is really where DreamWorks headed. For good reason. I mean, that's where the money was. That's where the acclaim was. The cultural relevance was. And of the big DreamWorks, works at the time, it does make sense why this one was swept under the rug. Yeah.
It just kind of, I think with Shrek, DreamWorks learned that an important lesson that if you want to take Disney on head to head, it's easier to just make a movie that takes shots at Disney rather than try to be Disney.
Totally.
This is when you watch this movie, this is a company. It's very clear to see this is a movie that's trying to take Disney on at their own game, and as opposed to just being let's take the piss out of Disney and make a movie that's can play with their image a little bit.
It's funny you say that because, again, DreamWorks in its inception was to be the anti-Disney, you know? And in doing so, the first two, Ants and Prince of Egypt, I would say, are pretty anti-Disney in that sense. But then this one starts to become a copy.
Yeah,
it's very strange how that
it's strange,
ended
but
up.
I think, like you said, it's strange. But you just said it's telling that this is the one that fails, right? And just
Totally,
doesn't work for them. I think this is proof that for whatever issues you might have with Disney, and God knows you and I have a lot, and I think a lot of other movie fans do.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we like a lot of Disney stuff too. But I mean, whatever issues you might have with them, there's no denying they know what they're doing when it comes to animation, and they have a certain style and skill set that other studios have found hard to replicate. Even as they've found their own paths to animation success, no one's really able to replicate what Disney does exactly.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a reason they are Disney, right? And truth be told, I'm a shareholder. I got some stocks. That shit dipped so hard, and I bought a few. So
I'm glad you said that, because we could probably get taken to court later if you didn't disclose that during the episode.
Oh yeah, no, I'm waiting for it to rebound. I really am. Hopefully Agatha all along does it for me.
As we record, debuting tonight. We'll be checking the numbers later. Yeah.
Are you gonna watch it? It's getting close to spooky season.
I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I have no real drive to sit down and watch it. But if I hear good things, I think you said this too. If we get to near the end of the season and I'm still hearing good things, maybe I'll sit down and binge it.
Yes, that's what I said in our friend group. I said if I hear from people I trust that it ends well, I will watch it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You and I say that, but if all of us are saying that, who's going to be the friends we hear this from?
Yeah, I guess you're right. We're gonna have to poll the audience.
I like the cast. I liked WandaVision, but I don't know. I'll wait and see.
Yeah. Should we talk about Rotel Dorado?
Yeah, I guess we should.
The legend of a lost city of gold, and the two men brave enough to find it.
I am Miguel.
And I am Tulio.
And they call us Miguel and Tulio.
7! Your dice are loaded! I will give you the honor of a quick and painless death. But not with that. I'll bet we can make that. Two pesetas says we can't.
You're on! You lose.
Dreamworks Pictures invites you
Holy shit!
Oh no!
to join two friends on an incredible journey
We'll follow that trail. What trail?
to the magnificent city of gold.
El Dorado.
Big smile, like you mean it.
They actually think we're gods. Miguel and Tulio.
The mighty and powerful gods.
Hello.
Now,
Going to need my help.
What makes you think we need your help?
Are you serious?
they're bound for excitement,
Who's the guy?
You the guy.
romance, and danger.
I know you are not gods.
You're not a god? That was good, huh?
Featuring 6 new songs from Elton John and Tim Rice, the Oscar-winning team from The Lion King. The Road to El Dorado.
Stop that.
Two con men, Miguel the realist and Tulio the dreamer, get hold of a map to El Dorado, the lost city of gold. After stowing away onto one of the ships of the Spanish explorer Cortez, the pair escapes and eventually finds the city. There, a sorcerer priest proclaims them gods in a scheme to win control of the city for himself. Meanwhile, they meet a beautiful girl named Chell, who helps the duo in their ruse in order to escape the city alongside them.
Yeah, fairly succinct plot description of the Road to El Dorado. Chris, I am curious. I'll let you go first in this one. I'm curious. I don't know if I know this, or was this a first time watch for you? Or if not, what's your history with this movie? And of course, what did you think about it this time?
I have seen this movie probably like 20 times.
Okay.
Yeah, like this was like a staple of my household when it came out. Again, I'm a child of the 90s, so when this hit, it was marketed towards young boys especially. And me and my brother, and even my sister at the time, we had this movie on repeat a lot. So I don't remember seeing it in the theater. I don't know if I did or not.
That would make sense.
But yeah. But I know we had the VHS of it. So I've seen it many, many, many times. So I haven't seen it in a long time. Probably, oh my God, 20 years is probably the last time I watched it. I know you watched it a few years ago, and I remember our conversation about it then.
I thought I remember that too, but I wasn't
Yes.
sure. Yeah, so
So I remember that. So I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to this conversation. But I will say this. I remembered this being a lot funnier when I was a kid.
Well, what a surprise! Yeah.
Okay, like a lot funnier. I don't want to step on your toes here, okay? But my 35-year-old brain is starting to agree with the stuff you said to me a few years ago.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
This is not. I was expecting to come into this episode for a much different conversation.
No.
Yes.
No. And I realized it. So like I'm watching the movie, right? And I'm like, okay, we got like a little Aladdin vibe here, and there's some mature undertones. We got them gambling. There's some flirtation with some chicks. You know, the animation is bright and colorful. It's got a really inviting look to it.
There's only some slight racism.
Slight, which is fine. It's like mini misogyny. It's okay. As long as it's mini misogyny, it's
Which
fine.
we also have here, so it's covering its
100%,
bases.
it's covering its bases. The blend of 2D and 3D CGI is like really well done, especially for the time. I do enjoy Tulio and Miguel's like playing off each other. There's a good feeling there. Like I understand the friendship, you know, and then the reveal of El Dorado's pretty good, and the only good score is when that happens. And then not Tom Sizemore shows up playing the villain. Who's an F2F alum from Judge Dredd.
Armando Sante, yes.
They have one good song when the characters actually sing, by the way. There's one and only, and it's called It's Tough to Be a God. And it's very reminiscent of Just Can't Wait to Be King. And then I felt like I was on my phone a lot. I think I like the first. I like elements of this movie. I can't deny my nostalgia for it. Of course, I can't deny that it was a staple of my childhood. But as a grown man now, the elements are fun individually, but when you put them together, they just don't mix well, and there's a lack of identity. And I even wrote this. I was like, this is the road to an identity. Like this doesn't know what it wants to be, what it wants to do. And then it just kind of like ends, and that's the movie, you know? And you know, we're getting into specifics, but that's where I'm at. It's like a mess.
Yeah.
Like it's a mess. It's a mess. Yeah. And it sucked to realize it, because I was watching it and I was
can't go home again, you know? It's like...
Totally. Like I was excited to watch it. Honestly, I sat down, and it's on Netflix here in Canada. So I was like, beautiful. I get it in glorious HD. I'll watch it on my big TV. I made kind of like a time of it. And then afterwards, it ended, and I went downstairs and talked to my fiance, and I was like, that wasn't as good as I thought. And so I mean, it was a little bit of a bummer, if I'm being honest. So,
oh man, I'm sorry that the Road to El Dorado episode is the one that's giving you some kind of like,
existential
crisis.
Existential crisis. I was like, was my child a lie? I was like, it was like the Ratatouille flashback, right? But I was like, what the fuck is going on? Anyway, I'll pass the baton. It's yours to hold.
I mean, yeah, my experience is obviously very different in that I didn't see this until well into adulthood. As you just mentioned, I watched this for the first time a few years ago, and God, you know, so on my revisit here, I was like struggling to remember why I watched it. Like, it must have been because this is not.
And you watched it like 2019, right? I looked at your Letterboxd.
2021, even later. Than that.
Shit!
This is not the kind of movie that I would sit down and watch for like no reason, right? Like, because I remember making a point to sit down and watch it, but I can't remember why exactly.
Is it because when did we do our Wild Wild West episode.
No, it could. I don't think it was that. It must have been. My assumption is that some podcast I listened to must have covered it or something, and so I was like watching it for that because I often do that, right? If if a podcast is covering a movie I haven't seen or whatever, I'll check it out. But I just want to take a moment and read the review I wrote in 2021. So I watched it on March. My first watch of this movie was on March 22nd, 2021. And I gave it 2 stars, 2 out of 5, because I do the 5-star system as Letterboxd deems. And I said,
I don't like that slight, by the way. I don't like that.
This is like, you know what? We're not Miguel and Tulio. We don't always get along, all right? Well, actually, they don't either. So maybe we are Miguel and Tulio. Well, let's decide that by the end of the episode. By the end of the episode, let's decide how much we're like Miguel and Tulio.
Sure.
But I said on Letterboxd, Road to El Dorado producers hiring Elton John. Oh man, this is going to be great. Lion King level success and acclaim. Here we come. Road to El Dorado producers hearing the songs Elton John turned in. Oh, never mind. And then I concluded, anyway, it should be illegal to make a movie called Road to El Dorado where they get to El Dorado like 10 minutes in and then they just hang out there. And I stand by that as well. I think that the title is a little misleading. But yeah, this is so... I'm kind of thrown off my game, Chris. You threw me off a little bit because I was coming into this one with my dukes up. I was like, oh, Chris is going to be one of those, because I've certainly seen this like nostalgic, based cult following for this movie coming in and saying, I saw this when I was a kid. It was great then. I still think it's great, because that very much happens with, I think, a lot of animated films. I think the animated genre...
In 2021, I thought that was the conversation. You said that it sucks balls, and I was like, fuck you, you're old and you suck.
Yeah, that's what I thought I remembered, and that's why I was coming in defensive here, because I had like a vague memory of that. I was like, I'm pretty sure this happened. But I think that happens with animated movies more than any others, right? We get really, really attached to the movies we kind of fall in love with as kids, and it is really rough, and it's why I'm like you. I hear the crisis you're having. I'm like scared to go back and like revisit some of the animated movies I loved as a kid, because it's like, oh boy, they're probably not very good. I was just young and stupid, But for me, as someone coming to this as an adult initially and then revisiting it again, I mean, the most glaring thing about this movie is the obvious mess it is from being 4 different types of movies jammed together, and none of them quite working and taking the forefront. And I've said on this podcast before about other movies, I'm not opposed to movies that have like tonal inconsistency or tonal confusion, because sometimes it can be fun, but it only sometimes, right? Some movies pull it off, and some movies you instead feel like the behind-the-scenes chaos. And I think that's the case with this one, because nothing ever takes the forefront long enough. And because ultimately they mostly settled on being a kid's adventure film in the vein of the classic Disney adventures, then whenever the movie gets oddly adult, you actually feel very uncomfortable. And I watched this with my fiance, and she, I think as well, had kind of like, she thought this was something she'd seen when she was younger and remembered it, like, kind of being into it. But then as we watched it, same thing. There was certain sequences with Chell and her relationship with Tulio, and just how adult it suddenly seemed, and some of the insinuations, we were both looking at each other, like feeling very awkward, like, hey, what is this in this movie, And then I just have we'll get into more specifics, but like, the villain, like his whole plot kind of makes no sense to me, and it's like not a great, and like the climax of this film I think is very, very underwhelming, especially how it uses Cortez in the climax. I want to talk about that for sure. I mean, the one thing I can agree with you with is that there is like a genuine chemistry between Tulio and Miguel, and that probably is chalked up to 2 great actors getting to record together. But so much else of this isn't working. The songs are bad. I mean, I agree with you that the best song is probably the one they sing, but all of like the narrated songs, the singing narrator with Elton John, they're just like bland Elton John songs, that have like no.
They're like a parody version of Elton John songs.
It's weird, right?
For Disney movies.
It really feels like Tim Rice and Elton John. Like they're like, yeah, we'll take the money and we'll toss this off in like a weekend.
Dude, they wrote 10 songs. That's too many songs.
We had the subtitles on watching this, so the lyrics of the songs would come up as well, and we're just laughing at the inanity of like the lyrics, right? They just are they just make no sense even. So the songs are bad, the story's not great, and like I'm not going to say the animation's bad, because it's not. You talked about the 2D and 3D blend, which is really good in this, and ultimately I think the animation is fine, but there's a certain animation style that I myself never respond very well to, and I think you'll know what I mean. It's where all the characters are always animated to be really big and really exaggerated and really constantly moving and mugging. And that's what's going on in this, where nobody ever stands still. They're always like very, very animated and making these like big expressions. And that's just an animation style I personally don't respond to. So that was like throwing me off as well. So yeah, this is, I don't know. I was just really nervous because I think it's oftentimes when you're an adult criticizing a movie like this, the go-to thing is like, well, it's not for you, it's for kids.
Totally.
But I mean, that's the problem with this movie is like, is it for kids? Is it for adults? It doesn't seem to know. And in trying to please like every audience, you end up pleasing none, right? And I think that's how I view this movie. So yeah,
I saw a lot of reviews from the time asking who this movie's for, and I think when you're looking at it through adult eyes, that's how you feel. And like the goofy, fun animal comedy is good, and it's there for kids and this and that. But then you have Chell giving a blowjob to Tulio, presumably.
Yes, that's what I was alluding to earlier. Yes,
and you're like, oh, and then somebody walks in on them, and then they have to kind of get themselves together. And all I'm thinking is like, I wonder if there was a cell that was painted in that had Tulio like put his dick into his belt. You know what I mean?
Well, we know from like the Disney history that animators are perverts.
Yep.
And you can't tell me the animation crew that worked on this didn't draw extra cells for these scenes for their own enjoyment and passing around.
Extra Chells.
Yes, there you go.
There you go. Wow, worst. But like, yeah, it's a big complaint I had this time was, especially after I obviously went to go read your review from a few years ago, and just how quickly they do get to El Dorado. I was painfully aware of that this time, being like, my memory, I've seen this movie 20 times. My memory was like, man, I can't wait for the adventure to get there. And it just doesn't happen. It does it in a bad Elton John song montage, and it's over with. And then they stumble across it, which is fine, I guess. Maybe there's humor in it, but I give me the road too. Like, give me what you really told me the movie was going to be.
Like, look, I know you hate when I rewrite movies, but I'm just going to come in and say, okay, fair enough. But if you start a movie with your two main characters that are this like comedic duo, and it's called The Road to whatever, and they are given a treasure map, you are telling me this is going to be an adventure road movie where we are watching them engage with that map and find this place. And as you said, they're given the map, and then they just end up stuck on a boat. And the boat just happens to like crash land on the island where the map is like pointing to, and they take out the map and they go, oh, it's right here. And it's like, oh, okay. So the map was almost like meaningless in a way, you know, like it just felt like, maybe this goes to the fact that so many different versions were written and then kind of rewritten, but it just, it's not the road movie I think you want it to be. And instead you're left with them just hanging out in this like, you know, this Aztec community, and that's where we started getting into like more problematic stuff, because ultimately then I haven't even gotten to like the thematics of the movie, that it's a movie about like, you know, two white guys, and they're Spanish but obviously white coded, two white guys coming in and teaching the Aztecs that human sacrifice is bad. You know, like it's just like, oh, there's some problematic gross stuff in here, and that's like beyond just the structural problems of the movie.
I guess I still do like the vibe of Tulio and Miguel. Like I still like them. Like they are likable characters to me. I find them just fun to be around. I do like the animation style. I know it doesn't sit well with you, and I totally understand why. So I'm not even gonna fight you on it, honestly.
But that's fair. Like I said, that's for me. Like that, you know, that's just my personal thing. Yeah.
And what I like about especially the early DreamWorks style, in the 2D form especially, the expressions and physicality really pop, and I do like that. And then I do feel like the movements sometimes are really naturalistic, like almost as if the actors were filmed and rotoscoped, which I kind of like. And that goes for especially Prince of Egypt. I think Prince of Egypt is like a beautiful, beautiful film. I like Tulio and Miguel. I like our main characters. And sometimes when we talk about movies like this for the podcast, our main characters suck, and we kind of despise when they're on screen. Like, what comes to mind, recent memory, is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I can't speak. I thought that movie was like pretty good and I had a good time, but boy, did I hate every scene that I was with our main character. In this one, the movie does come alive when Tulio and Miguel are on screen. Now, what you're saying is they just kind of hang out in like a temple the whole time. And the ruse is fun. The ruse of becoming or pretending to be gods is fun. There's a lot of comedy that can be had in doing so, and having Chell being there as a assistant to the ruse is fun, and for her to sniff them out immediately and being like, hey, you guys are fucking idiots. I'll help, but you got to get me the fuck out of here too. I like that too. It gives her agency. But I think, just having them hanging out, sitting around, talking the whole time is a bizarre adventure film.
Yeah, and not only that, I wonder if you agree with this too, because like what you're talking about, like what the fun moments are to you. I mean, I agree to a certain level, and I think even like another problem there is that then the movie has to do the thing of like going through the motions of saying like, well, there has to be like a conflict in the second act, so they have to like get mad at each other, and it's like it's so obvious that it's like, oh, it's just a misunderstanding, and ultimately they're going to come back together. So I'm kind of like, there's a part of it's just like, do we even have to bother with this? Like, we like these two together. These two are like fun as friends. As you just said, the most fun to be mined in this movie, if you're not going to have it be the road adventure movie, the most fun would be having it just become like this goofy comedy about all the things, all the hijinks they could get into as pretending to be gods. Yeah. And instead the movie's like, well, no, let's like spend 20 minutes on, Tulio hooks up with Chell and that makes Miguel mad. And now they have to like be at odds. It's like, oh God, like really, I know they're going to be friends again at the end. Can we just skip this,
And that's why it doesn't sit well with an adult brain, because we know that's coming. And a kid's brain it's kind of alien to them. Like when I was, a young boy, Chell is attractive. She's attractively drawn, right? She's sultry and whatnot. But do I understand the inner workings of a love triangle at that point in time? You know what I mean? Like when I watched Aladdin, Jasmine wasn't, like Aladdin, Abu the monkey didn't, as his, like the genie. Let's say Aladdin's sidekick, the genie. The genie wasn't hitting on Jasmine to make conflict between him and Aladdin. You know what I mean? Like they are friends. And that's what's fun about seeing them together. The conflict doesn't have to be about a weird love triangle and manufacture that out of nothing. So like, especially a friendship that has been around for so long, because I buy into that. I buy into this friendship. 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, and speaking of that, like it is true. Like when you watch it now with adult eyes too, it's kind of like you want these two to be friends. You just want to hang out with them and be like, get into the buddy vibe. But I mean, quite honestly, the thing that creates the conflict is, you know what, Tulio kind of does break the bro code a little bit there, right? It is pretty shitty to have, like, Miguel makes it very clear that he has this crush on Chell, and Tulio's like, no, we can't get involved with her. We got to just get the gold and get out of here. Don't get involved with the native woman. And then the moment Miguel like leaves the room, he's like, oh, but hey, Chell, you want to just give me a BJ here? It's like, hey,
totally,
come on, yeah. And so it does make you like, it actually makes you dislike Tulio, and that's like a problem too, because you just want to like both these guys.
Yep. Yeah, it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. Yeah. It's a weird wedge between them. There's so many other ways and better ways to do it. So I just, or like you said, don't have the wedge at all. Just have them snake around their fucking ruse, And in the meantime, you get the villain mix-up happens, right? Like this movie the inception of it is Cortez the villain. You get to the temple, it's changed to this sorcerer. But then the sorcerer, like, what is he doing that's so wrong? Like, I'm not really sure. I don't really get what's happening.
I mean, he's doing human sacrifice, which, as we all know, is a heathen act, and like white people need to teach them that that's bad. So,
but what I mean is like the tribe or whatever, the people don't seem to care about doing
This is honestly, like, I think on a structural level, right? Yes, the songs are bad. Yes, there's problems with, like, the humor and everything, but like, you have to have a great villain in an animated movie. Yes. And Tezel Khan, this high priest. So it's basically like there's two competing factions in this village, right? Or in El Dorado, the city. And that is, you have Tezel Khan, the villain, who is the high priest. He's the religious leader. And then you have the chief, played by Edward James Olmos, who is like very like just nice. He like likes Tulio and Miguel right from the beginning, just because he's like a nice, accommodating person. But Tezel Khan's whole like plot, this is what I was alluding to earlier, I just couldn't understand it, because he believes they're gods at first, but then he wants to use them, their presence as gods, to push his like religious idea that they should do more human sacrifices. And then when he finds out they're not gods, he's like very angry about it. But the whole time I'm just thinking, then the movie reveals he has actual magical powers. And I'm just like, if he has actual magical powers, what does he need the presence of gods for? Can't he like get like his community to like go along with his plan just with his own magical powers? And also it just has to be said, as you were just alluding to, the movie doesn't give him any other motivation other than the fact that he likes to sacrifice people.
Yeah.
But we're never told why. Like, what is his obsession with sacrifices? Why does he feel like it has to happen? I like, a part of me thinks that's almost like admirable, that he's just like so evil that he's like, I don't know, he just loves killing his neighbors. But I don't know. Maybe the movie needs a little bit more than that, so I can understand why he's trying to do what he's trying to do.
Well, it's so confusing because even in my plot synopsis, it's actually, my plot synopsis is right and wrong, okay? Because I said in there, a sorcerer priest proclaims them as gods in a scheme to win control of the city for himself. Okay, yeah. That's only partly true, because he 100% believes that they are gods.
Yeah.
And it's only until one pretty simplistic and clever moment, I would say, is Miguel bleeds. He has one drop of blood above his brow, and immediately Zekel Khan is like, "Yo, you're not a god," and I loved that. Then they dispatch of him for the time being, and then he stumbles across Cortez, and he sees Cortez, and he has this vision of what Cortez looks like as a god, and he then is a true believer that Cortez is a god. No. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. Is he a true believer, or is this a maniacal plan to win over all of El Dorado? And it's just not clear. It's really not clear. Even when I watched it, when I wrote the synopsis, and when I'm talking about it now, I still don't know what his plan is.
Yeah, and the thing with Cortez later, with that brings up like just more problematic elements. I know it's another thing. This movie was heavily criticized at the time from indigenous rights organizations, and I know in particular like the Mexica movement. I have this here. They argued that the movie portrays Chell as a sex toy for the two Spaniards, which, I think there's some level of truth to this. But then this is the part that it's like pretty hard to deny, and that the representation of them as saviors from the barbarity of human sacrifices and from indigenous collaborationism with Cortez has no respect for history. Why bother having any of these people like team up with Cortez, right? It's just like, what are you doing? And then, even just on a structural storytelling level, you have set up Cortez as a villain from the beginning of the movie. As you said, we are waiting for the big final confrontation with Cortez. And once he teams up with Tezal Khan, as inappropriate as that might be historically, at least there's some narrative oomph to that, where you're like, oh man, Cortez and Tezal Khan together are going to come into El Dorado and raise hell, and our heroes are going to have to like defeat them. No, the climax of this movie is just them like blocking off the entrance to El Dorado, and Cortez ultimately being like, oh, I guess you were lying, there is no El Dorado, and turning around and leaving. And that's it. Our heroes never have another confrontation with Cortez. He never finds them, never sees them alive again. What a bizarre like decision on a storytelling level, that he is just like barely a threat in the final act.
It ends on a total just whimper. Yeah. And if you have an adventure film, you need an oomph. You need a real big oomph at the end, right? And because of, I remember I mentioned that it was rushed out to get ahead of Emperor's New Groove, right? This feels like that. This feels like we have a whole sequence of Cortez coming into El Dorado with all his minions, and there's a big bloodbath, and there's a big fucking battle, and Miguel and Tulio use their wits, and Chell's there too, and we win the day, right? But then they're like, oh fuck, we got that David Spade movie coming out in 2 weeks from now. Let's just make them have a big wave and hit these columns, and then it's
again,
over.
I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry that I'm rewriting the movie again, but isn't what this movie's really should be building to is the moment where like Miguel and Tulio have to stand in front of all the people of El Dorado and say, look, we lied to you. We are not gods, but we are going to help you stop Cortez, right? Yeah. That's what the real ending of this movie should be. And the fact that it does not do that is baffling. The fact that it's just like, no, they just leave, and actually, when they leave, most of these people still think they were gods. And it's like, whoa, that's getting into like what feels uncomfortable about this movie, where they are leaving still with like their whiteness propped up to these people as like a godlike nature. And so the fact that they're never like revealed to everyone, like I do like that it's heavily insinuated that the chief always knows. He's just like, he's like cool with them because they're nice. But like, there has to be the moment where everyone finds out and they say like, we'll still help you, but more importantly, we'll help you in a way where we're not the saviors, right? We're just like, like, I know people love to shit on this movie, but this is something that like Avatar does better, right? Avatar's a movie that seems
what
like
movie?
It could be
what movie?
That one, I know nobody knows this, but nobody remembers this movie anymore. I know, but
okay.
Avatar, it's weird. It got a sequel, Chris. I don't know if you know that, but
it's on Netflix now. It's the show.
The M. Night Shyamalan movie, Avatar.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Okay.
No, but
very influential.
But Avatar is one of those movies, right, which it seems like, and this is, it's the Dance of the Wolves like factor as well, where it seems like it could easily be a white savior movie, and there's like something more under the hood, right? Mm-hmm. And this is just like, no, they come in, everyone thinks they're gods, and then they leave and everyone thinks they're gods, and they do like stop Cortez from coming in just by themselves, basically, with like, and so hooray for the two white guys,
For drama, me and you?
Yeah, that was the first name of the podcast that I pitched you, was hooray for the two white guys, and then we decided that a franchise was better. Actually, the reason we couldn't use that title is because that's what every podcast is.
Right.
Two white guys. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. The shroud for great drama, the shroud has to fall, right? Mm-hmm. And then the main characters have to prop themselves up with the help of whoever's there, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's, again, I completely agree, and again, I hate when you rewrite it, but you know what? By rewriting it, you just did cite other movies, but fair enough.
Well, yeah, but it's like, that's what, if Sam Raimi's Army of Darkness can do this better, then, there's no excuse for a movie that had 18 writers working on it over years to not figure that out,
So yeah, like this movie was, again, it was my existential crisis movie. It's been a while since I've had one of those, but this one was, the shroud fell on this one for me. My memories of it were so much more, and it really speaks to what you said about revisiting things from your youth. I'm cursed by this podcast, so I have to revisit some of my faves from childhood. But
we've been pretty negative about it, but can I just come in and say, like, maybe somewhat of a compliment about it?
Chell's banging.
Well, there's that.
Okay, go on.
The uncomfortable, like, oh man, the horny animated characters. Yes. I was looking at the reviews on Letterboxd, and I'm very aware of a big part of the cult following of this movie today. And I just want to read you some of the most popular reviews very quickly, right? I'm just going to read a batch of them I have here. Okay, so when is someone going to film a live-action remake with Oscar Isaac as Tulio and Donald Gleason as Miguel, and the relationship is totally not just platonic anymore? Another says, I can't believe there was a time in my life when I thought Miguel and Tulio's relationship was platonic. Another, Tulio and Miguel are gay and they're my dads. They're my gay dads. Another, this literally gets gayer every time I watch it. I can't believe Tulio's out here cheating on Miguel and giving us bisexuals a bad name. The road to LGBT Dorado. So I think it's kind of cool, I suppose, that like the LGBT community has like latched onto this movie. It's also kind of sad that it speaks to something we were like joking about Disney before. Mm-hmm. This is a genre that's been so devoid of actual LGBT representation that people like have, find it in movies that aren't really putting it forward. But there is something about Miguel and Tulio that obviously it feels very heavily coded that way, and it maybe would have been more interesting if they could, not that many animated films have the balls to do this, but if they were just able to say, yeah, they're a couple. But I have no problem with people reading it that way, and if like for that community, this is like a fun movie and it's become a big like cult classic for them on a camp level or whatever. Cool. So I'm glad there's people enjoying it. I just didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you think F2F fans, listeners, think that about us? Are we coded that way?
You
asked earlier the Tulio Miguel thing.
Yes, this is yeah. I mean, have you and I ever we haven't had the opportunity yet, but would you and I get butt ass naked and jump into like, an island like spring together? Probably. I don't see any reason not to.
At least one more time for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've shared a San Diego Comic-Con hotel room, so we're real close.
This is true. Like, if people are wondering, we have slept like next to each other, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Some may say beside when somebody didn't know.
On multiple occasions, yeah.
No, I think also with the question you posed, the Tulio Miguel thing, I think that you are more Tulio. I am more Miguel. The reasons being is I am more fly by the seat of my pants. I'm a little bit more emotional and I guess go with my heart in a lot of ways. You're more of a planner than I am, and you got engaged you got engaged first.
Yeah.
So there you go. So you got the girl.
I don't take that as you following my lead or anything on that, but I mean, the only thing I don't love about this comparison is I feel like you are saying that I would screw you over in the interest of a woman who came.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm telling you.
Oh, okay, all right.
yeah. It was a backhanded compliment. I'm glad you saw it. Yeah, no. So again, to say something, to leave on a little bit of a positive. Okay, this movie was a great time in my adolescent life.
Sure.
And I thought it really played well as a kid. I have very fond memories watching it with my siblings and laughing with it and having a good time. I think Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh are excellent in it. I think they really have chemistry. The characters, Miguel and Tulio, definitely have a friendship that I completely buy into. A lot of the animation is really bright, really inviting, very colorful. I like the armadillo game. That was fun. That was a fun little moment with the armadillo going back and forth to prove that they're gods. That was fun. But it is a big mess, and it's a shame. But
yeah, I'll say two last positive things about it.
Sure.
El Tivo, the horse, is pretty funny. Like
yes,
you said,
I like the horse.
He works as like a horse sidekick. And also, Elton John was in Kingsman: The Golden Circle, so this isn't the only like bad movie he's involved in, So it's like, I'll give it that at least,
Yeah.
So, Chris, we always like to, I think the answer to this is very obvious, but did this deserve sequels? Do we wish it had gotten sequels?
No.
Which is interesting, right? It tells you something about how much of a mess the movie is, because it ends on a pretty significant sequel setup of sending Miguel, Tulio, Chell, and El Tivo off on further adventures. And I think it's telling that we don't have a problem with those two characters. And like, honestly, the next movie could arguably be better. If it's just these two characters on an actual adventure. But this movie is like such a bummer. It leaves us, and I think a lot of the audience, just being like, nah, I guess we're good.
And I feel like we just saw as much as we can get out of these characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Like, what are Miguel and Tulio going to fight about next time?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Chell's part of the crew now, so they're going to be together. So we can't, mind that anymore. They're going to go after more gold, more adventure stuff. But like, what's going to be the arc? You know what I mean? And it's very hard to find with a movie that's so surface level, what the potential sequel arc will be. And don't get me wrong, some very flat first entry films have made great sequels. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. You just can't have a producer with a mission to destroy another studio and put his dick on the table. And I think that is a big problem with this. We always talk about producers putting their grubby hands in the mix and totally screwing with things and moving things over here and guiding the directors, that the vision is completely lost in the sauce, really.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes one big globbity-glook movie.
Yeah, that's ultimately the problem. The reason I would be still skeptical about a sequel is because this is a movie that wasn't made with a locked-in identity of itself.
Yeah.
And you would just worry that would continue, because it seems like nobody or everyone making this movie seemed to think they were making a different kind of movie.
Yeah.
And that's not a recipe for success, as we see here. And I would just be scared that would happen again.
Maybe we could have got some more memes. This movie lives on in memes.
Yeah.
So
I know you'll disagree heavily with this statement, Chris, but I would say this is the nail in the coffin that proves maybe there should just be a law that Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh cannot appear in movies together.
You know what? You lock it up.
All right.
So I think that'll about do it for The Road to El Dorado. Swing and a miss from both of us. Going forward, though, we're sticking with animation. As we covered with this month, animation 2D Evastation. Guess what, Trev? I'm adding a D.
Oh my God.
So speaking of putting big D's on the table, we're looking at animation 3D Evastation.
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within from 2001, and then The Adventures of Tintin from 2011. So it's kind of cool that we're jumping 1 year ahead from a movie that blended 2D and 3D animation to a fully 3D animated feature, and then jumping a decade after that, adding brand new technology from the great Peter Jackson. So...
Yeah.
Hey, listeners, it's Chris again. I made another mistake. I meant to say from the great Steven Spielberg, not Peter Jackson, which we'll discuss in that episode. But obviously, Peter Jackson was supposed to make the sequel, didn't get the chance. So again, Trev did not correct me either, live on the podcast. Thank you very much. Very professional. Anyway, Tintin is by Steven Spielberg. You know, the guy that we just talked about that helped create DreamWorks Animation. Unbelievable. Okay, back to the show.
It's kind of cool.
Can I just say too? I don't know. Does this make any sense to you? When you just said the year of Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, and I realized it was 1 year after this movie, that kind of like blew my mind. Because I don't know why, like in my head, if you'd asked me, I would have thought that Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within was definitely like 5 years before this movie or something.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and maybe we'll talk. That'll probably become why I'm thinking that will probably become more clear when we talk about, you know, just like the overall like hype about the movie and the reception to it. But
Sure.
They don't seem like movies that would exist that close together. But what do I know? You know,
It's wild. No, I know. It's. I mean, they were on their way. You know, like think about that because like what Shrek comes out in 2001 as well.
Yeah.
So. It's that 2000s. We were right on the cusp of a totally changing animation landscape, and it's funny that we put this the programming together for our show, and it's just coming to us how brilliant we really are.
Yeah. You know what? Hooray for the two white guys.
Okay. Follow at F2F Pod. That's at F2 the number 2 F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Join the tribe and hit that subscribe. The El Dorado tribe, if you want. Speaking of appropriation. And then rate, review, whatever you do. Throw us a star rating. Gold star, be great. More puns. Okay, we gotta go.
Let's get out of here.
We gotta go.
Let's jump on our horse and ride off. I don't think we never mentioned Rosie Perez's name once. I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's not doing a Rosie Perez thing, which I actually appreciated.
Yeah.
Hey?
I mean, I think it's telling that like she can be sexy even just through voice work, I suppose.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Banging.
I mean, Chell, whatever. Like, give me Judy Hopps. You know?
I was going to bring her up. But I chose not to.
Or,
you know why? Because they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're taking the geese.